Sometimes things are big, and sometimes things are small. This is the case for Bakugan, truly one of the things with size, and in that sense, Bakugan could be called a universal constant. The ball is one of the classic shapes, formed naturally throughout the cosmos by gravity. Roll a snowball down a hill, it becomes a bigger snowball. This is a Bakugan. Squeeze some water out into space, it becomes a ball. This too is a Bakugan. Throw a whole bunch of rocks into empty space, and they will find their way to each other by even the weakest of gravitational pulls, and, given sufficient time and sufficient mass, they'll turn into a ball. We too will become a Bakugan sooner or later. We humans do not exist on such a vast scale. In fact, we are small. We are insignificant, simply stalling till we die in the face of an uncaring universe. But we too will become part of this little blue and green Bakugan floating in space. If we want to enjoy the cosmic force of the ball, we must make it ourselves, even smaller than we are. But golly, what size should we even make them? Hi, I'm Jett Kuso, and get ready for a frickin' normal Bakugan video. No twist in this one, no sir, don't worry about that. Just a Bakugan video about some Bakugan. Nothing to see here. And hey, if you find yourself having fun and enjoying what I'm making, please support me with a channel membership to get emojis, perks, shoutouts, exclusive videos, and access to my exclusive Discord server. Since we're already speaking about the existential, here's a game that perfectly blends the catastrophic with the adorable. Doomlings, the official card game of the end of the world, and this video's sponsor. Easy to learn in just 5 minutes, Doomlings is perfect for family or adult game nights with enough competitive strategy to entertain a room full of hardcore trading card game fans without getting bogged down in complex rules. And something really rare, you can even play with just 2 players and it's still just as fun as it is with a group, making it perfect for your local comic shop meetup or a game night date night. I played a bunch of games with my local comic book shop group, and every single game was weirder than the last, with a ridiculous amount of variety that kept the game from getting monotonous in the way that a lot of card games do. And we were able to customize the game, removing cards that we didn't want to play with, and adding new cards from expansions that seemed like they'd be fun. I especially enjoyed the retractable claws trait that allowed me to play a ridiculously high value card, but only if I discard another one from my existing pile. Each round, the Aegis cards add new rules to completely change the playing field, and sometimes turn out to be catastrophe cards that completely alter the game while ushering in the apocalypse. After 3 catastrophes, the world ends and your scores are tallied up to see who won. I've really been wanting a good party card game that doesn't take an hour to teach, and Doomlings is pretty much perfect. Everything you need to play comes in one box, whether it's just the classic game or the deluxe edition, which includes the base game, 3 mystery holo foils, a playmat, and 5 expansions to add more advanced mechanics. And you can check out Doomlings using my link below in the description, and use my code JET20 for 20% off of your Doomlings. It's totally worth it, whether you have one person to play with or a whole family. Again, use code JET20 for 20% off of your Doomlings. Click the link below or scan this helpful QR code. The biggest things that you could call a Bakugan aren't exactly Bakugan. There's the Dragonoid monster truck, which is pretty big and exists only because Spin Master bought the toy license for Monster Jam a few years back. I do love this truck. I met him at a Walmart and gave him a smooch. They even made an RC toy of the truck, but unfortunately, he is not a ball, and I only care about the ball. Spin Master's LA headquarters has, or had, this big door shaped like a Battle Planet Dragonoid that they used to generate hype early on in Gen 2. I think it's obvious that this doesn't count, for similar reasons as these Bakugan-shaped chairs they had at BakuCon in 2009. They might be balls, they might kinda have Bakugan lines on them, but it's furniture. And if it's furniture, it's not a Bakugan. Next down is the Baku Sphere, the most inconvenient form of storage ever conceived. Stock, it can fit 8 Bakugan and some cards, which is a pitifully limited amount. I'm gonna need a lot of Baku Spheres. No, it does not fit comfortably into any bag.
Yes, trying to open it makes me feel like Ultra Magnus trying to open the Matrix of Leadership.
If you really want more space, you can remove the plastic insert and chuck Bakugan into the raw tin, but Bakugan are magnetic, and they will open on the metal of the tin. And gosh, if you can manage to fill it past the middle line, whenever you open the tin, they all spill out. Oh no, oh god, oh, this doesn't usually happen. I'm so sorry. It's like when you pay in cash at a cash register, and the cashier gives you the change in cash on top of the receipt, and you try to shove the whole thing into your pocket, and then you pull the receipt out later, and the coins go everywhere. Anyway, this is a storage tin, and it isn't a Bakugan. Next down, a late-stage Bakutech product, and the only Japanese Bakugan tentatively called a Deca. Though we'll talk about Decas later, and you'll find they bear very little similarity. This is Drathron, the Japanese attempt to make a similar capstone product to Dragonoid Colossus or Dragonoid Destroyer. And while these two products were clunky, weird, and barely felt like Bakugan toys at all, like most capstones, Drathron is almost more Bakugan-y than the typical Bakugan. First, you can roll it onto a gate card like standard for a standard stand. It has a G-Power, a card, everything. In the anime, he was literally used in the game like a normal Bakugan, though I doubt it was ever allowed in tournaments in the same way. I don't know what the heck was going on in Bakutech, I haven't watched it all. Second, you can close him back up and flip out these little stands, and he has another function. Appealing to Bakutech's focus on skillful rolling and performance, Drathron features a target gem right here. Impact it with a Bakugan, and it explodes into a ramp with 2 more targets on either side. Hit those in any order, knocking them back, then roll your Bakugan onto the ramp and POW! A more full-fledged version of the prior activation, with wings expanded. What a stroke of brilliance, turning this into not just a big chunk of plastic, but a skill challenge to test your Bakugan rolling abilities against. Without contest, this is a true Bakugan, the largest of them all, and much more. Drathron's DNA comes from Deca Bakugan, but there's something in the middle that's just slightly bigger than those. Gen 1, Year 3, Gardalian Invaders. This might look like a Bakugan. It might roll and open in a way that evokes a Bakugan. But don't worry, it's worse. Slightly smaller than a Deca, a Bakumorph is mostly an action figure, trying to create a more anime-accurate impression of the main Guardians of Season 3. And in that regard, they suck.
Bakugan Gundalian Invaders. Explode into action with giant auto-transforming Bakugan. Then turn your Bakugan from a ball into a massive monster with amazing detail for the first time ever.
It looks wonk as hell, acting as both a lousy Bakugan and a rather subpar action figure, if you ask me. They're really most similar to the Dicelings from the D&D movie toy line, but those don't really pretend to be anything that they're not. If you think the Dragonoid doesn't look that good, the others don't look much better, and it's really quite silly from the start, because this little Dragonoid here is anime accurate. That's one of the beauties of classic Bakugan. I get that they wanted to represent the full monster forms, but a normal action figure would accomplish that much better for the demographic that would actually want that. And sure enough, they've made action figures for Gen 2, and if for action figure people, that's great. Better than the pop vinyls. Trying to transformographize the concept of Bakugan into an action figure without letting go of the magnetized ball thing is purely an act of folly, if you ask me. And it's one of the greatest examples of how Bakugan really only works when it's compatible with solid gameplay. Which my next thing doesn't, but they kinda get away with it. Only slightly smaller than Bakumorphs are Deca Bakugan, honestly one of the weirder facets of the brand that stuck around even into Gen 3. Literally just take a normal Bakugan and make it bigger. Made it bigger. Most aren't the exact same sculpts as their smaller counterparts, some of the details are filled in or hollowed out, but in every way that matters, well, they're just bigger versions of standard Bakugan. They had them in Gen 1, though the gimmicks of any Bakugan that had gimmicks, like Preus's attribute change wheel, were removed.
Deca Bakugan went away in Mectanium Surge and only appeared in Bakutech as Drathron. But then they returned in Gen 2 as a fairly consistent sometimes food.
And now again in Gen 3, this time with the same combination gimmick as the small guys. And though sizes have often varied across different generations of normal Gons, Decas have always been the exact same scale. Can you play with these Bakugan though? Well, on rare occasions, Gen 1 released Deca Gate cards in special packs, though with no text effects, and certainly not enough to actually form a full deck of these things.
Conversely, the gameplay trappings for Gen 2's Deca Bakugan were not quite so, accommodating. These oversized character cards that came with TCG promo packs don't have any correlation to any of the actual Deca Bakugan they put out. In fact, they're for Ultras. Though Ultra Decas would be wild, I think you'd have a hard time getting them to actually work. And there's also the fact that the Jumbo Baku cores that came with the Deca Bakugan only had character art on them, rather than the stat bonuses of true Baku cores. It's a missed opportunity, but that didn't stop us from getting a giant playmat and trying our hardest to play a full TCG game using Deca Bakugan and cores as proxies for their normal versions.
Look, these boys don't have actual, like, core information on them. They just got little pictures on them because they're not supposed to be used for gameplay, because this is a farce. Where's the tape? It's gonna be great.
Where's the tape guy?
Alright, so I got it looped, and then just lay it as flat as possible. Stick.
Unfortunately, the magnets on them aren't quite big enough to compensate for the added mass, so they don't tend to work too well when you roll them fast enough to play at large scale. They don't even work that well rolling them normally. As a product, I am endlessly perplexed by Decas, and the fact that they just keep making them. Do these actually sell well? Do kids actually love them enough to buy one of these rather than a proper Bakugan at a lower price? I can't say. I don't know. I have no information. No answers exist. It isn't known. The truth will always elude us. We may never find out. I can't say. Another step down, we have these beauties. Some odd little barely gons that open via push button where the magnet should be. On 3 separate occasions, McDonald's put out Bakugan Happy Meal toys for years 1, 3, and 4.
If you have an appetite for action and a thirst for excitement, Bakugan Mectanium Surge is battling into McDonald's. You can get a Bakugan Battle Ball or Mectagon action figure in your McDonald's Happy Meal.
In the first wave of these, the Delta Dragonoid, Dual Hydronoid, and Preus actually came in 4 different attribute colors each, lending a lot of variety. They also came with exclusive cards that could be used in the actual game, even though the toys definitely couldn't be. I'm sure there were many confused children wondering how to actually make use of these ability cards alongside the push-button toys, which is a confusion I do not envy. Somehow across all 3 years, all 3 waves of Gons use the same scale, and they've always been just close enough to being actual Bakugan that I could never bring myself to throw them away or donate them how I might a typical Happy Meal toy. You'd be hard-pressed to find an eBay lot or a box at Goodwill that doesn't have at least one of these lost among the real Bakugan, like the single French fry in your onion rings. Good for them. Good for them. B3s.
Finally, some good food.
Perhaps the most prolific of all Bakugan sizes, the B3 term isn't technically official. It technically refers to something else due to inconsistent naming conventions, but it follows the pattern from the B1s and B2s of Gen 1, so it's the easiest way to refer to any 36mm sized Bakugan. The first lineup of this sort were Baku Blasters, a subline of disc-shooting Bakugan that mostly only made their way to Europe.
Transform to blast anything and everything. Lightning speed, explosive power, huge destruction, Baku blasters, total domination. You can collect them all. New Baku blasters, each sold separate.
After that was the Saburoku line of Bakutech, scaled up just to make room for more features, which they did. That's how we get Barry Beyond, the Bind System. That size was eventually continued in Bakugan's first reboot with Bakugan Battle Planet. The early Battle Planet Ultras made excellent use of the extra design capacity, creating complex Bakugan never seen before or since. 36mm is still the scale they're using today for Gen 3, albeit the designs are so simple I feel like they'd come off a bit more impressive if they were a bit smaller. B2s, for instance, were an excellent scale, just big enough for some decent complexity, and just small enough to feel impressively compact in your palm. As the primary scale for Gen 1 and Bakutech, they crammed a wild amount of engineering into these little orbs. But a lot of the Gen 3 stuff is hardly any more complicated than B1s were, apart from the combining gimmick the new stuff uses. And B1s are just truly something special. Not for their complexity, but for the size. Only around for a brief couple years at the very start of the brand, they were built to be no larger than a standard shooter marble. The necessary simplicity definitely shows, but they were so cute and tiny that it almost doesn't matter. You can fit a whole collection into your pocket. They're like some kind of pocket monsters. They do break easily, and time has not been kind to the micro mechanisms or the tiny springs, but nothing beats a B1 Fear Ripper. Something about it just sells the concept of Bakugan so well. A surprisingly cool monster in a surprisingly tiny ball. A lot more than you'd expect from such a compact package. And the same goes for Ultra Bakugan, making use of every curve, every angle, everything that can possibly fit inside. Technically, there is something smaller than B1s, which are nanogons, these little accessories from late Gen 2. And I do like them! I like how well they mesh with the brand. They do feel like Bakugan in a sense, but being unable to open on their own, they fail to be quite as delightful as even the simplest B1. There was even a brand called World's Smallest that partnered with Bakugan, specializing in creating little tiny versions of other famous toys. Then they inexplicably changed their name to World's Coolest and put out some Bakugan that were literally just keychains in the normal 36mm size. Speaking reasonably, I don't think you can get any smaller than B1s, not without posing major choking hazards, which is likely why they moved to the B2 size in the first place. If a kid swallows one of these and it pops open deep down where it really shouldn't, well, regardless, even if they'll never get so small again, I love them. Of everything in my Bakugan collection, this box of little guys sparks the most joy. And looking at my B1s and how much I absolutely love them, I think about that idea that I talked about in the intro. The idea that the universe is so large and vast that it cannot possibly care about us. That we are insignificant because we are so small. A lot of people feel this when they look up, look out, and learn just how big the universe is. That's natural. The fear of the storm, of the lion, of the mountain. Something bigger than you that can easily kill you. We're right to be scared, but I don't know about the rest. Setting aside the concept of God or some other intelligence deciding what matters, and assuming the universe truly is impartial and truly doesn't care, what decided that size is what makes something matter? That mass correlates to significance. The whole idea of bigger means better almost led me to restructure this script to go from smallest to biggest, but in trying to actually write that way, I found that the bigger doesn't make the Bakugan better. The smaller, the more compact is just as compelling to me. Why is it that size must denote significance? Why not temperature, density, speed, rarity, or the rate and quantity of information passing from mind to mind in a society? Why not say that being almost in the middle between the Planck length and the size of the observable universe is what makes us important? If the universe is impartial and empty, what's the difference between this And this. Size, sure. But why should size matter more than this? Why should it matter more than us and our connections with each other? As far as we factually know, we're the only things in this universe with a concept of significance at all. And that's not just cope. That's not optimistic nihilism. Nothing can decide for us what makes us matter. Some people make the arbitrary decision in light of this that it's size that counts, turning the universe itself into a god that doesn't care because that feels better than realizing it's us who don't care about ourselves as much as we should. I get to live in a universe where I am the perfect size to be me, and enjoy my silly little marbles and talk to my silly little friends. To me, that's the biggest thing there is, no matter how small. This is Jett Kuso, and I'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, or connected with it, or if it made you feel something at all, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel because I want to make a lot more stuff to make people feel things and remember stuff. And, of course, thank you to the people that make that possible over on my Patreon page. Thank you to my Diamond patrons, Immortal Blank, Lucid LANA, CHOOKA Bear, RAZU RION, and TENZIN, my Titan patrons, CR107, Gusano, Plecopleco, and Banana Jones, and my Hyper patrons, Gavin Greenlee, Trouble, Mudorios, Orio, and 3 new Hyper patrons, Alyssa Gretlein, I'm gonna try to say that right, not sure, BakuJerk, and Mannsky. Oh, and thank you to some new base patrons as well. Emmers, Nerf Kitten, Chrissy No! And 2 patrons that I think are old patrons, but maybe I missed them and never put them on this list, or maybe they changed their names, I'm not sure. But they're Icarus and Rataznable. I want to say your name, Rataznable, but there's capitalization in it. Anyway, thank you so much. Support my Patreon if you want to help me make more stuff and help get this channel sustainable so I can make more videos more often. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.